Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome you to a new League of Legends video. In this video, I want to go over the new changes that are coming to Kassadin that are currently live on the PBE server. So with that being said, please don't forget that the changes that you see in this video are not necessarily final, and what you see now could be different from his actual release. However, this still gives a good depiction of how he can and possibly will look like once he finally is released. So all of his skills actually got some form of rework done to them except for his E. So I want to go through each of his skills, tell you guys what's different, which skill of course is different, and overall just an overview of whether it's a good or bad change. So let's talk about his passive. It's slightly different, but it still gives him the 15% magic deduction. But it does not give him the extra attack speed per damage reduced. Instead, now it gives him the ability to ignore unit collision, which is really good because it doesn't give him a useless attack speed buff that, come on, no one really put much use into it. This also greatly helps a champion like Kassassin, who of course has an assassin-like playstyle. But this kind of confuses me because when I played him and looking at his skills, for example his Q, which I'll talk about next, it feels like Riot tried to make him a bit less of a burst type assassin and more of a tank AP, something similar to potentially Diana. So of course, with that being said, let us jump into his Q ability next. So now his Q actually does less damage, but it also applies a shield onto Kassadin. On top of this, his Q does not silence anymore. Instead, it now interrupts channel abilities, so for example a Fiddle Drain or Nunu ulti. So let's go a bit more into this ability and really dissect it. TLDR, I think the Q is actually worse than it currently is. But let's look at the numbers. The current Q on the live server has 200 plus 70% AP ratios at rank 5. However, the new Q is only 180 base damage plus 60% AP. So clearly it does overall just less damage, which is a little interesting considering that the passive seems to be more towards assassin type champions, but the Q is quite the opposite. It now not only deals less damage, which of course does not complement an assassin kit, but it also grants him a shield, which I mean is okay for an assassin, but it's not really something an assassin does usually have. It's more of a tank AP type skill. And then of course on top of that, his Q does not even silence anymore. Instead, it just interrupts channel abilities. I mean, that's pretty bad. I mean, with all that being said, the Q does help him a bit in the laning phase. Sure, it does not deal as much damage. Sure, it does not silence. But that shield, if you're laning against an AP champion, can be very, very useful when it comes to trading. But honestly, that's just about it. So overall, I definitely think his Q is nowhere near as good as it is currently on the live servers. But let's jump into his W. His W even further contradicts his passive change, but not in a bad way, because I think his new W is actually very, very good now. Right now, it gives you a flat boost to your auto attack damage, which is 20 flat damage plus 10% AP, passively, and the active effect gives him a huge boost to his next auto attack, which is 140 plus 60% AP at level 5, and it restores 8% missing mana, but it goes up to 40% restoration of your missing mana if you hit a champion with the next auto attack. But remember, this is only for one auto attack. This makes it a lot easier to get a chunk of mana back and complements his get in, burst, get out type abilities. What makes his W even better is that it is an auto attack reset skill. With the current live passive, you always have to just stand there whacking away at something for 20 minutes to get any form of mana back. Now, if you hit a champion with it by ulting in and auto attacking, you get a very large amount of mana back, which can then let you continue your combos. After getting your tier in Rod of Ages, getting a Lich Bane is almost essential now that his W is so prime. To me, it feels like his whole kit now just revolves around using his W properly, which is why I want to show you this specific clip right here. As I'm playing the new Kassadin on the PBE, all I'm trying to do is ulti away and ulti back in whenever I can, ready to proc my W. Look at me, I have 0 mana, right? But why does that matter? I simply have to W, do some crazy damage, I get a lot of mana back, and I can continue the plays not having to worry about that at all. So I came back to the Hecarim, did a lot of damage, my W does a surprising amount of damage, and I don't even have my Lich Bane yet. But in a teamfight, this is all you're doing. You're jumping in, doing a lot of damage with the W, getting out, and then repeating that. Still somewhat similar to how he's played now, is just your W is a lot more important. And it's a lot more of just get in, do damage, get out. But let's jump to his E next. This spell is actually the exact same thing as it is on the live server, but the animation does look new. So all I want to show you guys here was a new animation. And with that being said, let us jump into his ultimate next. His ultimate goes back to the initial thought of making him less of an assassin, since its damage is much lower. But at least it looks pretty cool. It now has 0 AP scaling, but instead it scales off of mana, which is why Tear of the Goddess and Rod of Ages is so much more important now. The base damage for the initial and subsequent jumps is the same, which at rank 3 ultimate is 120 base damage and 60 bonus damage per subsequent jump. And instead now it does not scale off of AP whatsoever, but instead it scales off of your max mana. At rank 3, the ultimate will initially scale off of 6% max mana, and the bonus damage that is applied for each subsequent jump will be scaling off of 2% of your max mana. They also seem to make the mana cost much lower for the first 2 jumps, and the third one it is the same as it currently is in the live server in terms of mana cost. But the jumps after that will begin costing a lot more mana, up to 1200 mana, because now it doubles the cost of mana from the previous jump rather than just simply adding 100 extra mana. So with that being said, it only stacks up to 4 times now. They also made the buff before the ulti resets 4 seconds longer as well, to a total of 12 seconds versus 8. As the game progresses and you keep ranking up your ultimate, the cooldown on it significantly lowers compared to the current one, which of course is really good. So overall, the new Kassadin is interesting. I am unsure what direction Riot tried to take him into, as he is now sort of a mix of assassin and tank AP. His Q and ulti are overall worse, I think, in terms of damage, but at least his ulti can make him a bit more mobile late game. The best thing by far is of course the change to his W, which, if you combine with Lichbane, will deal a huge amount of damage. And his laning phase might be a bit easier now with the shield on the Q. But that's it for this video, guys. I hope you learned something new about the new Kassadin. Please throw in a like if you did enjoy this episode.